It's funny, isn't it? How you can look back at your life and see the exact moment it split in two. A before and an after. For me, that moment was at a party, under the worst kind of spotlight imaginable, where I learned that the life I'd spent 7 years building was a lie, and that the man I loved, the man I'd built it all for, considered me nothing more than a stepping stone. He thought he broke me that night, and for a while he was right. He thought I would just disappear into the wreckage he'd made of my world. It never once occurred to him that I would do something else, that I would rebuild, that I would upgrade, and then that I would come back to collect. This is the story of how I discovered just how disposable I was to the two people I trusted most in the world, but it's also the story of what I did about it. Before I get into the crushing discovery and the revenge that followed, I have to take you back. You need to understand the architecture of our life together, how meticulously it was built, how much I truly believed in it. Only then can you understand the magnitude of the demolition. Our story, Mark's and mine, felt elemental. We were those university sweethearts. He was the charismatic business student, and I was the art history major who, in his words, softened his edges. For 7 years, my life wasn't just parallel to his. It was completely interwoven. We were a single unit. I wasn't just a girlfriend. I was a co-founder, strategist, and therapist, all unpaid. We'd sprawl on the threadbare carpet of our tiny apartment, drafting the business plans that would make him a millionaire, surviving on a diet of instant noodles and cheap wine. I designed his first logo. I helped furnish his first real office. I poured my entire soul into his dream. He called me his indispensable partner, the future Mrs. Roth, and I believed him with a depth that felt like a law of physics. When he proposed, it felt less like a question and more like a confirmation of everything we already were. To celebrate, he threw this massive party at the city's most exclusive art gallery. A nod to me, he said. Everyone was there. Our families, friends, investors, even reporters. The air was buzzing with this electric feeling of success, and my heart was so full I thought it might actually burst. And right there, holding my hand, was my best friend, Chloe, my maid of honor. The sister I never had. We'd been inseparable since kindergarten. She was my person, my emergency contact. I trusted her with things I'd never uttered aloud to another living soul. That night, she kept whispering in my ear, "You built this, Elara. You deserve all of this." How could I ever forget that? The plan was for a grand toast at 10 p.m. Mark got up on the stage and the whole room went silent. He looked right at me and I could feel my cheeks ache from smiling so hard. This was it. "Tonight is about celebrating partnership," he started, his voice smooth as silk. "For years, I've had someone by my side who has been instrumental to my journey." He paused and I beamed, but then his eyes shifted, just slightly. "And that's why," he said, "I need to build my future on a foundation of truth, not convenience." The word just hung in the air. Convenience? My smile started to feel like a mask cracking on my face. "Elara," he said, and my name sounded like a verdict. "You have been a wonderful part of my past, a stepping stone, but a man who builds an empire needs a queen, not a placeholder." The silence in the room was so total it felt like a sound. My blood went cold. Stepping stone? Placeholder? The words weren't making sense. This had to be a joke, a grotesque, terrible joke. I looked over at Chloe, needing to share a look of disbelief, but she wasn't looking at me. She was staring at him with this strange, unreadable expression. And then Mark's eyes found hers. "Chloe," he said, and my whole world just tilted off its axis. "Will you come up here?" She walked right past me, my maid of honor, my other half. She walked past me without a glance and joined him on that stage. "The heart wants what it wants," Mark announced to our friends, our families, the reporters. "And my future belongs to Chloe." Then he got down on one knee, right there, And he proposed to my best friend with a ring twice the size of mine. I just stood there, a statue in the middle of my own personal earthquake, while the clicking of cameras captured my complete and utter devastation for eternity. Her tearful yes was like a gunshot in my ears. I finally stumbled backward and just ran. I ran through the stunned crowd, the sound of my own sobs finally breaking free. And I didn't stop until the only thing I could hear was the hollow, aching space where my life used to be. That was the night the old Elara died. And in her place, something else. Something cold and hard and clear began to grow. The days that followed were a blur. I was drowning. The story, of course, went viral. I became the placeholder fiancée, a meme, a cautionary tale for pathetic, jilted women everywhere. Every notification on my phone was a fresh wave of public humiliation. I shut everyone out. My family, my friends. I couldn't stand the pity in their eyes. Then came the text message from Mark. It was the spark that lit the fuse. I know you're hurting, Elara, but this is for the best. I'm willing to offer a generous settlement for your contribution over the years. A settlement. He was trying to write me a check for 7 years of my life, my ideas, my love. He wanted to dismiss me like an employee. That's when the grief finally burned away, and all that was left was this pure, clarifying rage. I didn't reply. Instead, I packed a bag, bought a one-way ticket to a quiet town in Italy, and I vanished. For months, I walked the quiet cobblestone streets, trying to forget the roar of the crowd and the flash of the cameras. But the rage didn't fade. It simmered. It became a cold, hard stone in my gut. I realized grief was a passive emotion, but anger was an active one. It was fuel, so I channeled it. My days became a ritual of discipline. I woke before the sun, not to paint landscapes, but to dissect financial reports from Mark's industry. I traded my art history books for tomes on corporate law and market analysis. Every night, I would map out his company's vulnerabilities from memory. I'd poured my entire mind into his dream once. Now I was reforging it into a weapon for myself. My life changed in a small cafe. I was mapping out a flowchart of corporate weaknesses when a voice interrupted me. That's a rather aggressive-looking diagram for such a peaceful town. I looked up at this man, Julian Thorne. He had this quiet aura of power that was unmistakable. We started talking, and for hours he didn't just listen. He engaged. He saw the fire in me, this raw, untapped resource. It was only later that I Googled him. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a reclusive billionaire, a legend they called the corporate undertaker for how he surgically dismantled companies. He was drawn to my fire, and I was drawn to his mind. One night, I finally told him the whole sordid story. I told it with cold fury, not tears. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he looked at me, his eyes laser-focused. "Revenge is a dish best served cold," he said. "But you're thinking too small. You're planning to throw stones at a fortress. You need a cannon." "And I suppose you have one?" I asked. "I have an arsenal," he corrected. "And a proposition. Marry me, Elara." I just stared at him. "You're proposing a merger?" He smiled. "Precisely, a strategic partnership. I give you the name, the access, the unlimited resources to execute your project. You become untouchable. In return, I gain a partner with a fire I find captivating, and it silences my board about succession." It was a cold, calculated business deal, and it was exactly what I needed. The heartbroken girl was gone. In her place was a woman who understood that love could be a liability, but power was always an asset. "I accept," I said, "on one condition. When it's over, we dissolve the partnership. No strings attached." He agreed. 2 weeks later, Elara Thorne was born, and for the next 6 months, I disappeared into the most intense education of my life. I wasn't just Julian's apprentice, I was his project. Our days were spent in a war room in his penthouse, the glass walls covered in flowcharts and market data. He taught me not just theory, but tactics, how to spot financial weaknesses that looked like strengths, how to leverage public perception like a stock. We ran simulations, dismantled hypothetical companies, and debated strategy until dawn. He was ruthless, exacting, and brilliant. He never treated me with pity. He treated me like an equal, a peer in the art of corporate warfare. He wasn't trying to fix the broken girl. He was forging the weapon he saw inside me. My anger was honed into a weapon of devastating precision. I was no longer the placeholder. I was the storm. And I was finally ready to make landfall. Our return to the city wasn't loud. It was a whisper. We took the penthouse at Thorne Tower, a palace that literally looked down on Mark's headquarters. The first move was carefully orchestrated. A charity auction I knew he and Chloe would be at. They'd become the city's scandalous it couple, and they loved the attention. I walked in on Julian's arm. And the moment Mark saw me, his face went completely white. Chloe's jaw tightened. They were shocked. I wasn't supposed to be here, on the arm of a man like Julian Thorne. I was supposed to be irrelevant. I just met Mark's gaze from across the room and gave him a slow, quiet smile that didn't reach my eyes. The message was clear. I wasn't in his orbit anymore. I was in another galaxy. Little did he know, my plan was already in motion. Stage 1, financial strangulation. I knew Mark's biggest secret. His flagship product depended entirely on a processing chip from one small German firm. An exclusive deal I had helped him negotiate. Using Julian's resources, I had a shell corporation buy that German firm outright. 3 days later, Mark got the notice. His contract was terminated. His supply line was severed. His stock began to bleed. He had no idea he was begging for scraps from the woman he'd discarded. Stage 2, social demolition. Mark and Chloe thrived on public adoration, so I decided to take it from them. I started hosting exclusive gatherings in our penthouse. I invited everyone Mark was desperate to impress, but I never invited him. Slowly, their social currency evaporated. Chloe was a special project. I reconnected with our old friends, not to recriminate, but to quietly tell my side. I planted seeds of doubt, not about the affair, but about her character, revealing small, verifiable betrayals I had previously kept secret out of loyalty. The final blow came at the winter charity ball. When Chloe tried to join a conversation I was having with our old friends, a chilling silence fell. Then, one of them turned her back on Chloe and changed the subject. Watching her face crumble, I felt nothing but a cold, clean sense of justice. Stage 3, unearthing the skeletons. Social ruin wasn't enough. Mark had built his life on a foundation of truth, so I decided to show the world his truth was made of fraud. Julian's team of forensic accountants dug into his company's past, and I knew where to tell them to look. They found it. Wire fraud from his early days. He'd faked purchase orders to inflate revenue and trick investors, a crime that could send him to prison. But they also found more, a string of other affairs. Chloe wasn't the love of his life. She was just his most convenient upgrade. And he was already cheating on her. I now held his entire life in my hands. The takedown was almost complete. All that was left was the public execution. And I knew the perfect stage for it. The stage I chose was the Global Tech Summit, where Mark was about to be crowned Innovator of the Year. It was his coronation. Winning this award was the only thing that could save his now struggling company. He was so close he could taste it, and I was going to turn it to ash in his mouth. My team and I built a website, a digital dossier we called the Roth Ledger. It held every piece of evidence, the fraud, the affairs, the sworn statements, everything. It was ready to go live with the push of a button. Julian, a keynote speaker at the summit, arranged for a special presentation right before Mark's award. That night, the ballroom was electric. Mark and Chloe were at the front table, preening. He looked like a king. When his eyes met mine, he gave me this smug, pitying look. The look you give your past. It was the last time he would ever look at me that way. The lights dimmed for Julian's special presentation. But instead of Julian, the massive screens lit up with the logo for the Roth Ledger. A URL appeared. A murmur went through the crowd as people pulled out their phones. Then a voice filled the ballroom. My voice. "Good evening," it echoed. "For a year you have been told a story of love, ambition, and truth. Tonight we're going to talk about the real truth." Mark's face went from smug to horrified in seconds. The screen shifted to his fraudulent financials, and my voice calmly walked the entire room through his crimes. Investors stared at him, their faces like stone. But the deception wasn't just financial. My voice purred, as photos of him with other women flashed on the screen. The company's founder values truth so much he has a long history of using partners, even his current one. The final image was a crystal-clear photo of Mark kissing a junior analyst in a hotel elevator from last week. Chloe let out a strangled gasp. Their epic love story, exposed as a cheap lie to the entire world. The final slide was a picture of me from that night at the gallery, tear-streaked and broken. And next to it, a photo of me now, sitting with Julian, powerful and calm. My voice delivered the final line. "My name is Elara Thorne. A year ago, Mark Roth called me a placeholder. He was right. I was holding the place of the person I was meant to become. This is not revenge. This is a market correction." The screens went black. The lights came up, and in the absolute silence, every single eye was on Mark Roth. I met his gaze one last time and gave a small, final nod, a dismissal. Then the room just erupted into chaos. We didn't stay. We walked out, the sea of shocked faces parting for us. It wasn't the giddy rush I expected. It was a profound, quiet calm, the feeling of a debt finally being paid in full. The news, of course, was explosive. Mark was arrested. The company imploded. Chloe became a social pariah. They were erased. A few months later, Julian and I were back at the villa in Italy where it all started. "Our contract is fulfilled," I said quietly. "You're free to dissolve the partnership." He was silent for a moment. "I've been reviewing our agreement," he said, his voice strangely serious. "And I believe I've found a loophole." I turned to him, confused. "Yes," he said, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "The agreement was for a strategic partnership. But somewhere along the way, I fear I've breached the contract. My feelings have ceased to be strategic." He took my hand. "This started as a business deal, Elara. But the brilliant, fierce, and resilient woman I've come to know, I'm not interested in dissolving a partnership with her. I'm interested in building a life with her, if she'll have me." And in that moment, I realized something profound. The revenge was never the real victory. Tearing down Mark Roth wasn't the happy ending, it was just the prologue. The real prize wasn't his destruction, but my own reconstruction. The strength I'd found, the life I'd built, and the completely unexpected love that had grown from the ruins of my past. Living well isn't just the best revenge. It's the only one that truly matters. I smiled, a real smile this time, and squeezed his hand. "I think," I said, "I might have found a loophole too." The past was a closed book, but the future was an open page, waiting to be written. And for the first time in a very long time, I couldn't wait to see what happened next. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from the ashes of a betrayal, I would be honored to hear your story of strength in the comments below. Your journey could be the one that inspires someone else. And remember to subscribe for more stories of justice and new beginnings.